We're talking Indianapolis Colts on the Our Football Network, Our Football YouTube channel. And when we talk about the Colts, we send this gentleman, Kent Sterling. How's it going, Kent?
It's going good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How's your channel doing?
Oh, it's doing great. Awesome.
And of course,
very happy.
Yeah, we'll have a link in the description so everybody can check out the Kent Sterling YouTube channel. We also want to remind everybody to purchase the 2025 edition of the Our Draft Guide. This is last year's, but this is going to be mailed out April 7th, I believe, is our target date. That'll give you several weeks before the draft to check it out. So we have all sorts of profiles, scouting reports, and everything here in the draft guide. So we'll have a link in the description for this. We'll also have team reports. And this is what these fact-finding missions are, interviewing really cool insiders like Kent Sterling for the Indianapolis Colts. Really helps us out to put a plan together. And don't forget, too, we have the Our Insider itself, where you can purchase that. Link in the description. You can bypass the ads on the website. I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that. And don't forget the depth charts, of course, are updated every day. And this is a really busy period with everything going on, combine next week, and of course, free agency and the draft. So this is the place that you want to check out, ourlads.com, and definitely the time of year to do that. Kent, let's get into this. I know there's a lot going on, of course, with the Colts, like every other team. One of the things I did notice going over free agency for the Colts was, because I've been doing this now for a few weeks and been interviewing a bunch of insiders, that the Colts seem to have the most options in free agency to free up cap space.
Yeah.
There are players there that maybe haven't even performed well or have coming off injuries, guys like Braden Smith or Ekuban or Raekwon Davis or Taquan Lewis. And I go down the line. There's a lot of money the team can save. What do you think about those names? And maybe, I don't know if there are any other names I haven't even mentioned yet, of where the Colts might be able to save and whether or not you think they will try to cut some of these guys and save money.
It's not what they normally do. It's not their normal mode. But if they really, like Chris Ballard in his season wrap media availability, talked about learning from his mistakes and understanding that, you know what, maybe the Colts need to be a little more active in free agency. And they do have a lot of money sitting on the table. The thing with Braden Smith is nobody knows what's happened.
Okay.
Like there was no revealed during the season. Nobody inside is willing to talk. And one thing that I would applaud Chris Ballard for is, man, they get buttoned up. Like they do not talk out of school. There are no leaks within that organization to local or national media. So nobody knows exactly what's gone on with Braden Smith and why he missed the last few games of the season. He went from being in the locker room and being at practice and playing to not being there at all.
Wow.
And the explanation being, hey, it's a personal thing. And that's all well and good. But when you're going to be paid $20 million to play right tackle or thereabouts, and your dead money is, what, 3.5, maybe get in the building, or you're going to find yourself as a cap casualty. And I think that's kind of where they're headed. I think they liked Gonsalves last year at right tackle and see him as a guy who can step in and really not hurt him. But it is not Ballard's way necessarily to move on from his current guys and try to upgrade through free agency. That has not happened a lot through his 8+ years as a GM.
Well, considering he's back, and I'm sure there's a lot of fans or people from the outside are probably thinking, wow, I mean, he's pretty fortunate. He's got another chance. And like you said, learning from his mistakes. Maybe this will be one of them. Maybe there's a lot of things he isn't used to doing that he's going to have to now do.
Right.
You would think that would be the case, because if things didn't work out before, well, obviously do you have to wait to get fired? You know, that whole thing about, well, I learned, my last job. And does it really take you having to get fired in order for you to learn from your mistakes? I don't think so. And maybe he doesn't think so either.
It shouldn't.
No.
It's a pretty good way to get fired. Your only option is really to learn from getting fired. If you refuse to learn from your mistakes the first time around, you have the job. I think there's only that one route to wisdom.
Yeah. Okay. So So what do you think about, again, you got Ekubon, Davis, Lewis,
Yeah.
Smith. If you had a guess, and again, let's just say he sticks to his old way of doing things and maybe they'll all be back. But let's say he doesn't, right? Let's say this is a new way of thinking. Can you imagine who might be back out of those four?
I think Lewis is probably the guy who's most likely. He's versatile. Ballard loves him. He's really, he is we say this about everybody on the Colts, and it's nauseating even to me, but he's a great dude in the locker room. People love him within the organization. That's respected by Ballard and by the guys who make decisions. Other guys like Ebicom, we haven't seen much of. He's a very quiet dude, so I don't know whether he's going to be back. You do have, I don't think, like Raekwon Davis, I don't think the return on investment was really very good.
No.
With Raekwon Davis, although they don't have a lot of options at the defensive tackle spot. They've got their starters, but depth pieces. Yeah, and that's one thing. Like Lewis, you can move inside a little bit. But I mean, Tevin Bryan's a free agent, so he's going to be gone. He can't play. Yeah. Dayo Odengbo is a free agent, but I would expect that he's going to be the one guy among the free agents that the Colts really look at in terms of bringing back, because he's made a jump every single year since they drafted him out of Vanderbilt, and he had that torn Achilles, and since then. He's kind of progressed in a way that I don't think that the Colts want to lose out on what's going to be a really good kind of second contract for Dayo Odengbo.
Yeah, that's the whole idea, isn't it? Of developing players. Don't say you're developing players if you let them go when their first contract comes up, just as like you said, they start to improve. And I don't know if you remember, we talked about this, but Dave Syvertson, one of our top scouts, really liked Dayo coming out and thought that he would be somebody to keep an eye on. And like, again, as you said, it took him a couple of years, but now he's starting to develop. Do you think, and I read somewhere where he could be a potential tag guy. Do you think they might use a franchise tag? Is this something that they don't normally do, use the tag?
They do not use it. The last guy that was tagged was Pat McAfee back in 2013.
Wow.
So that is not something they do very often. And I think it would be a little bit squirrely to take Dayo and put him in kind of a jackpot where he earns, top 5 edge dollars in the NFL.
That's getting a little carried away.
I don't think he's a top 5 guy.
Yeah, I agree. And just sign him to a long-term deal. I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, they do have the money, and if they need it, they have a few players here that they can open up some cap space for. Okay. Other free agents. So what is the deal with Flacco and the whole quarterback situation behind Richardson? Should they just bring him back, or are they going to be looking for a new number 2?
I think they need to look for a 1A. I think they need, because Richardson has shown 2 inabilities. 1, to stay on the field and stay healthy, and 2, to be accurate enough to play in the NFL. I mean, 47% completion rate is not nearly good enough. So he's going to go work with like Chris Hess in the offseason and try to figure some things out, and hopefully he does. But I don't think you want to go all in behind that. So if there's a guy, and I don't know what his disposition is going to be with the Steelers, whether the Steelers are going to go Wilson or they're going to go Fields. But if Fields was affordable at any level, if you could get him a couple of years at $11 million a year, just to throw out a number, man, I really like the way that Justin Fields fits this offense.
Yep.
How he's kind of not a replicant of Richardson, but very close in terms of skill set. I kind of like that. Flacco's going to be gone. Flacco, the thing with Flacco that I loved is that people kept trying to paint him as a mentor for the young quarterbacks. And Joe Flacco, in everything that he said and everything that he did in every workout that we got to watch, said like there was no mentor,
no communication
whatsoever. Like that was not his game. He wants to play football. He's there to play football. He's there to prepare to play winning football. And being a mentor that was what he used to. We'd ask Richardson about it, and Richardson would say, "Well, when I throw a pick or something, or I make a bad read, I come sit down, and he tells me, 'Hey, it's just football.'" Well, that's not the message of a mentor to a student ever. So
yeah, you
I
do a
think
lot better than that.
From Flacco, and they go get a guy who could be a potential 1A, and is going to force Richardson into kind of an uncomfortability.
Okay.
Where he realizes that I better get this right, or I'm going to be out of here.
And you expect that to be a free agent or a trade partner as opposed to drafting anybody?
I don't know who you could draft, who you could count on to come in year one, and be that kind of guy.
Okay.
I don't know who, and especially because the Colts draft at 14 and then 45, and then I think they're at 80 in the third. I don't know who you can go out.
Yeah.
Maybe you can go out and get like Will Howard, and he's going to be accurate with the football, but is he athletic enough to be able to run that offense? I don't think there's a perfect kind of a fit.
Okay. Let's see. Sermon's also a free agent, as is Mo Alley Cox, Granson, and Doolin on offense. Some of the skill position players there. Who do you think will be back among that mix?
I think Doolin's the most likely because he's really good at special teams.
Okay.
He's a guy I think the special teams would take a significant step back without Ashton Doolin.
Is he the gunner?
Sermon's a ghost. Gone. Mo Alley Cox should be a ghost, but I think they're going to have to figure out how that draft is going to work. If you can get, if you can get a starting tight end who can do everything.
Oh yeah.
At tight end.
Yeah.
You'd rather have that than this tight end by committee where you got five guys trying to cobble them into one.
Yes, and there are going to be two of them. Well, one may be available, one not. We know Loveland will be available at that spot, but there is a possibility. I mean, we did our mock drafts the last a week or so, and he was there. So we know there's a possibility Jets could take him. That's definitely a possibility.
Right. And that's at 7.
And that's at 7. But if he doesn't go to the Jets, then there is a possibility he slides all the way to 14. It's possible. So.
And he's the best of the bunch. I mean, Tyler Warren's 6'5", 260, 255. He blocks.
Yep.
He would take direct snaps at Penn State. Really good receiver, can run after the catch. I mean, he's the perfect guy.
He is.
If he's available at 14, grab him.
Absolutely.
But if he's not going to be there at 14 and you allow Ollie Cox and Granson to move on, that kind of puts you in a jackpot a little bit.
Yeah. Even though they do have, let's see, do you think that Mallory, Woods, Ogletree, are they capable of, let's say if you brought in one tight end like Warren, could you see, okay, yeah, Warren, Ogletree, Woods, Mallory, that's okay. Those 3 guys behind Warren, that's doable. And when I bring that up, because obviously, like you said, let's just say something happens, they let those 2 free agents go and Warren is taken by the Jets. Now, what do you do? Is it panic, or is it, no, we just got to find a tight end. And once we find our tight end, it could be Loveland. Maybe we trade back and get Loveland. I don't know. Maybe we pick a tight end in the second round. Do you think that they're okay then with Ogletree, Woods, and Mallory as far as depth?
Well, the thing with Woods is he can't stay healthy. I mean, he's a 3rd-round draft pick, and he's got the skill set that you need to be able to be really, really good. But he can't stay on the field. Mallory can't block, and Ogletree is okay, not a great blocker, and occasionally his hands are a little bit blocky, but none of them is perfect. No, like to win a championship, you got to have a tight end.
Yeah,
you got to have a real guy at the tight end position who can change the game a little bit and go move the sticks for you. And they just, I don't think it's any one of these guys. Okay. And it became so predictable that you knew that if Mallory was in the game, they weren't going to run the football. They were going to throw. And if Ollie Cox was in the game, it was really likely that they were going to run the football. So it was it was a tell.
Yeah, that's not good.
As to what the offense was going to run.
Yeah.
And Warren completely mitigates all of that.
That's right. Okay. Let's slide on over to the defense. Actually, the offensive line. Okay. Yeah. So Kelly, interesting. That's just a couple of years ago. I don't know if it was last year, but a couple, not this past season, but a couple of years ago, when the Colts had a very healthy offensive line and everybody came back and it was so great. And that doesn't happen very often. And sure enough, it didn't happen last season. The whole line banged up. But let's start with Kelly. He's the biggest name of the group at center, missing almost half the season with an injury. What's the situation? He's a free agent now.
I think they're real comfortable with Tanner Bortolini, and Ryan has a tough time staying on the field. And if you're going to pay a center north of $10 million, you got to be pretty confident he's going to be there for 17 games, or as confident as you can be. And there's really no reason for that confidence with Ryan. So investing that level of money when you have other positions of need, I think is almost irresponsible. I think, Will Fries turned out as a 7th-round pick, turned out to be a terrific right guard. But the money that they're talking about him commanding in free agency, I think you go get another guy late in the draft, plug and play him at right guard, and you feel pretty good about it. It's good that Ryman and Nelson are both back. Smith, as we talked about, we don't know what's wrong with him, but he's not expected to be back.
Okay.
So you've got kind of two of those spots where you feel good because of Bortolini and Gonsalves. Glowinski wasn't great coming back. They might feel pretty good about Dalton Tucker, who was the one undrafted free agent who stuck last year. But once he got on the field and people figured out like his strengths and his weaknesses, it seemed like he was pretty easy to attack.
Okay.
And they kind of came in over the top of Tucker. It wouldn't surprise me to see them take in the first 4 rounds somebody who can be an interior lineman like they did last year with Bortolini and Gonsalves. If you can get a guy in the 3rd, 4th round at one of those positions, I think you feel good with Tony Sperano Jr. being a coach, being able to get a guy to kind of raise his level of play. So I'd be kind of surprised to see Kelly or Fries back. I don't think Ali Cox is going to be back. Sermon and Flacco, no. Doohan, I think, comes back. And then the rest, you're kind of in a position of what's the difference?
And Freeland, has he not advanced enough? Is he somebody that you don't think can turn into a starter at this point?
As a rookie, he looked pretty good, but he was light. And I think last year he tried to put on about 15 pounds. And that 15 pounds didn't carry well, and he just couldn't move.
Okay.
And so they played him at right tackle a little bit, and then as soon as they felt comfortable with Gonsalves went in and he stayed in.
So Gonsalves is definitely the one, and Bortolini. Those are the 2 guys that they drafted last year that they're pretty happy about then.
Yep.
Okay. Defensively, taking a look here, not a whole lot compared to the offense, but we talked about Deo, of course, up front. That's the big one. Blackman's a free agent. EJ Speed is a free agent. Those are the 2 other notable guys. So what do you think about their status?
I think they're both gone. And I think they both should be gone. Julian Blackman had a shoulder last year, so he couldn't go out and hit people the way that you need a free safety to go hit people. And so if and this is the 2nd year in a row, like he was a free agent last year too, he got no nibbles, and so he came back to the Colts on a team-friendly deal. That could happen again, but I think what you've got. And I think a lot's going to depend upon the evaluation that Lou Anarumo does as the new defensive coordinator and what he thinks of Blackman's a good kind of a ball hawk free safety, but he's terrible in run support. EJ Speed misses a lot of tackles. He's undersized. I think you need a guy who can get out in coverage, but can also support in stopping the run. And I don't think that's EJ Speed. If you're going to have Zaire Franklin on the field, then I think you've got to have an upgrade at EJ Speed's spot. And if not Jalen Carlies, it wouldn't, who's drafted last year and played pretty well as the season went on.
Okay.
I think he'd draft a linebacker, or I don't think they're going to sign one in free agency. I don't think they're going to overpay ever for a linebacker. They let Bobby Okereke go the other year over $10 million. to the Giants, and that was a decision where they didn't blink. I don't think that they're going to sign EJ Speed and bring him back, or sign a free agent linebacker to go replace Speed. I think that's going to be through the draft.
And there are a ton of linebackers that'll be available right in those middle rounds. That would make a lot of sense, I'm sure. Okay. So before we move, because you mentioned the Colts' newest, because we didn't talk about the coaching staff yet.
Yeah.
Anarumo is now the new defensive coordinator. Otherwise, again, is also not just Ballard, but there's a lot of talk about GM is going to go, the head coach is going to go, and none of that happened. So the only big change, I guess, is the defensive coordinator. Is that the case?
Yes. And the staff, like parts of the defensive staff also changing, because, when you've got Gus Bradley, you get Richard Smith, and you get Ron Miles, and that's the way they work. So I know there's a new linebacker coach, but it's going to be interesting to see what Anarumo does, because it's not with Bradley. It was kind of like, this is my system. This is what we do. With Anarumo, he's more game specific in how his defense is going to attack. Similar in that they don't blitz much. The Bengals didn't blitz much, but they were really good at getting to the quarterback with 4 guys. I think Latu is going to have to take a step up at end. And Anarumo, then, I think it's going to be really interesting, because there will be game specificity with the game planning on the defensive side of the ball for the first time since, you got to go back to before Eberflus to get that kind of thing. So this is going to be kind of fascinating to see how it works, and how Anarumo looks at the defense and says, okay, you know what, Jalen Jones is either like my quarterback along with Juju Brents and Kenny Moore, or I need a guy with a different skill set. I think it's going to be interesting to see over free agency and into the draft. I think we're going to get a good look at what Anarumo believes his defense to be and what those needs are.
Yeah, following the Bengals, I noticed, especially not last year. Last year was terrible, but when things were going well, that he tended to just stick with, if he had his 5 DBs, man, those guys played all the time.
Yeah.
He didn't play a 6th or 7th very often, and he played mostly 2 linebackers. That's usually how he played, and it was right down the line, and that's when he was, I guess, his most comfortable. But again, there were a lot of veterans, guys that probably knew the system, and he trusted them and so forth. So I wonder if that's a little bit of a change that we're also going to see here.
And that's kind of what Gus has always done. I mean, and what Eberflus did. You've got the 2 backers in Speed and Franklin, and then you've got the DBs. They would swap out guys occasionally at corner, but a lot of that was health related.
Okay.
Kenny Moore as a slot corner is solid.
Yep.
Jones was solid this past year. You've got a gaping hole at free safety. I mean, you've got Rodney Thomas as the backup on the depth chart, which is right, but I don't know. He may not make the team. He didn't see the field the back half of the season. So you've got a gaping hole at that spot, a gaping hole at linebacker, because Stewart is not going to be a guy that you're going to rely on at that spot. Carlisle may jump in there. Carlisle is nice. He's fast. He's physical. I like Carlisle, but we'll wait and see what happens. I'm really looking forward to seeing OTAs and minicamp a little bit, and then seeing what the strategy is in free agency, because the strategy to this point has been, let's focus on the draft and not sign anybody.
Womack also played a lot, and he seemed to play better than maybe some people thought.
Yeah.
So is that somebody that you feel they can count on?
I kind of like him. Talking to him right after they acquired him from the Niners, he had a chip on his shoulder, and he played like he had a chip on his shoulder. He didn't want that to happen again. We talked about, learning lessons from being fired. He did not want to get fired.
Yeah.
And he swore to me that he was never going to get fired again. He was going to do exactly what he had to do to succeed in that job with the Colts. And he's still pissed off
That's
about
great.
getting waived. And so I really like Sam Womack. I think he's a quality guy in the locker room and a guy who on special teams is going to help you too.
Now, one guy who was a polarizing figure the last year or so was Nick Cross. And we're all waiting for Nick Cross, who's going to take a big step up. What was going to happen? And it appeared that he did take a step up. Is that the case?
He did. He did, and he needed to. They gave him a second chance. In camp last year, he hit Josh Downs in a non-contact shell. Like they're going 7-on-7, it's non-contact, and he whacked him pretty good. And Downs was out for the first few games of the regular season because that happened in camp.
Yeah, that's not
and
good.
We thought that Cross was going to get shot, that he was dead man walking with the Colts. They worked with him. They gave him a second chance, and he did. He took full advantage of it. And I think that he's an interesting guy because he can play free too. So he can move if you go too high, which Anarumo will do occasionally. He can play back there. He can run support. He can play box. And so what are they going to do in free agency? Are they going to sign a guy like Simmons and bring him in as a free and have Cross as the box? I think it's going to be really interesting to see where Cross lands as far as Anarumo kind of getting that defense to where he wants it. But he did. He took a step up last year under duress.
Well, hey, sometimes that's how that's what it takes. Okay, and then so I know we didn't go into it, but how do the fans generally react? How did they generally react to not moving on from said GM and head coach? What was that like, and how is it now?
I think that we've been beaten into submission. Like every year, it's the same thing. They're 8-9, 9-8. The 4-12-1 aside in 2022, but they're mediocre. But so good is the enemy of great, but good is also the enemy of mediocre and bad. And so, do you want to take a bunch of steps back, or do you want to keep kind of that same thing and see if Richardson can kind of get to that next level? And so I think that the fans were like, all right, and who's Jim Irsay going to be able to hire? Like the first thing I'm going to ask if I'm a candidate for that job is who do I answer to as a GM? Yeah. Do I answer to you? Do I answer to Carly? Which of the Irsays am I answering to? And what is the succession plan? There are a lot of question marks with this franchise, and it might be that Chris Ballard is the best general manager that this team can get at this time with all the question marks about ownership.
Interesting. I remember watching one of your videos at the end of the season and talking about how Irsay had pretty much had like a mandate of talking about what he expected from the team. And but that didn't happen. And so shouldn't there then have been consequences for that? Apparently not. So
no, wouldn't that be great? That's a job I want where there's no consequence for mediocrity. That'd be awesome.
Yep. Okay. So let's talk about overall needs. And we've already kind of touched on them, but let's go down the list. Do you have have you done that yet? Have you kind of put together? Okay. You pretty much know. Okay. So what's top number one need overall?
I need a quarterback that can play winning football consistently, a guy who can deliver the ball accurately, and a guy who can stay on the field from a health perspective. That's need number one. Need number two is you got to be able to go knock the opposing quarterback down. Now, do you do that by kind of taking good care of the secondary and giving those rushers another second to get to a quarterback? Or do you go out and get an edge guy who can, come in on passing downs and take Kwity Paye's spot, let Dio go so you don't spend that money, somebody who can come in at the edge on the left side and go get to the quarterback in measure that Kwity Paye hasn't.
Okay.
And then I think they're in good shape at wide receiver. I think A.D. Mitchell learned a lot this past year. And I think that, if you've got Pittman, Pierce, and Downs, you feel pretty good about it. I would want to upgrade kind of that 1A running back position. Jonathan Taylor is a great home run hitter, but he's not a good receiver, and he's not a good blocker, and he's not a guy you can rely on 3rd and 2 to move the sticks. And so I think you need to go get that guy. And they've had that guy in the past. And so I feel pretty good about Chris Ballard going out and getting a guy like that in the draft. Like Nyheim Hines was a really good receiver out of the backfield. Zach Moss, who they got in return for Nyheim Hines. That was a guy who he ran hard. And if you tried to stop him within those first 2 yards, he put his shoulder pad into your kidney in a way that you remembered it. And a good blocker besides. But Jonathan Taylor has kind of put the Colts in the same position that they're in terms of tight end, where you want a guy like 1st and 10 from the opponent or from year 20, he can take it 80.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff he can't do. And then obviously you need tight end. You need Tyler Warren, one way or another. That's the guy. Watching him at Penn State, I was like, my God, what do we have to do to get this guy? Is he a top 10 guy, top 20 guy? Where are we going to land in the draft? How do we get Tyler Warren? That was like after week 4 at Penn State last year. I was in love with the guy.
And do you see a scenario at all where Ballard, with his experience in the draft, would actually move up to get him if he had to?
Boy, that's not the way he operates.
No.
That's not. He'll trade back all day long, but trading up is not something that he engages in without some kind of duress. I mean,
it hasn't worked before, so maybe you try something different. So,
yeah, exactly. You got to do the opposite. It's like ordering lunch.
Shock everybody.
I'm not going to get to every day. I get chicken salad. Today I'm getting tuna salad. All right.
That's it. Yeah. Whatever it takes. Okay. Also, you already mentioned a few of the players. You mentioned Carlisle. You mentioned Tucker, Womack. Give me a few other players that might be young players. We talked about Bortolini and Goncalves also. Some other young players that could wind up, could be from last year's draft or whatever, that could be an impact player in the next year or two.
I think Mitchell could be.
Who's that?
Mitchell is a guy who can get open, and I think he learned last year. I think he came in really immature and didn't understand what the NFL was, and looked really good in camp when there was no contact. And then when there was contact, all of a sudden kind of got the alligator arms, and as the season went on, he got a little more active and a little more willing to put himself in harm's way. I think he's kind of figured out what it takes to be an NFL receiver. I hope he has. And they've got next year, they got a decision to make about Alec Pierce. And Alec Pierce has a decision to make about the Colts.
Yeah.
So there's going to be an opportunity for A.D. Mitchell to come in and do some things, assuming that he's kind of taken that leap from year 1 to year 2 from a maturity perspective and understands what it takes to be a wide receiver. And then on the other side of the ball, Latu is a guy who's got to take that leap from rookie year to second year at edge that we see really good edges take.
Yep.
Latu's got to be better. He's got to be more versatile in the way he goes after a quarterback. And he is really skinny. Like for an edge, like in the locker room, you look, you're like, holy hell, he's an edge. Even I know he's not going to look like Grover Stewart. He's not going to be a 300 behemoth.
Yeah.
But man, if he's 230,
he's the last guy off the bus.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But he's got to get home, and it's Anarumo's job to make sure that Latu gets home. So hopefully he's able to scheme something up and make that happen.
Gould, did he look like somebody that could take another step?
Gould might be a return guy.
Only, yeah.
They played him a little bit at receiver, and even in the return game, they relied on Josh Downs a lot more than they relied on Gould. I think Gould wound up being a disappointment.
Okay.
You take a guy like that, was it 5th round, 6th round?
5th round.
You would hope that he'd be able to return, but even in camp had a tough time holding onto the ball. And I know a guy who coached him at Oregon State, and he loves him and said he'll go to work in the offseason and he'll figure all this out. So hopefully Gould is one of those guys.
What about Stewart? Stewart got some reps last year coming over from Tampa Bay. What kind of player is he?
Which
Grant
guy?
Stewart, linebacker, Grant Stewart.
Oh, Grant's number one. He's a great story. And the Colts, I thought you said Stewart, so I got confused. I apologize. He's a guy who in run support is really good.
Okay.
And then if he's got to cover somebody, not so good because he's not fleet of foot. So if you want versatility in a linebacker, he probably isn't your guy.
Okay.
But man, on teams, that guy busts it. That guy will knock people down on special teams and do what he's told to do. And like I said, his story is just awesome. I mean, he was homeless. His mom was an addict.
Wow.
And he kind of found football through a high school coach, went to college, sort of figured some things out. And now he's in the NFL and his mom's doing great. And so his stories, if he could play to the pedigree of his life story, he'd be a Pro Bowler.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Who is the number one corner on the team?
Jalen Jones right now.
Okay.
Because we don't, and that excuses Kenny Moore because he's a slot.
Yeah.
But Juju Brent, it looked like it was going to be really good. He couldn't stay. He came to camp, wasn't on the field early, got on the field, got hurt, came back late in the season, got hurt again. And they're all weird injuries. Like he took a hit to the nose at one point that kept him out for a few weeks. Just weird, quirky injuries. So everybody's hoping that Juju can get on the field, stay on the field, because he projects toward being a really nice. He and Jones could be bookend corners for 5 years. Neither really fast, but both are really long and both play the ball well. It wouldn't surprise me. I'd kind of like to see them shore that up in the first 3 rounds or go after a guy in free agency where you've got some depth. Because, I mean, you look at the depth at that position and really what you got. You know, you've got Womack, but he's more I always thought of Womack kind of more as a backup to Kenny Moore a little bit, even though he played outside. And then, like Dallas Flowers played some last year, but I don't think you want Dallas Flowers, on a really dynamic receiver.
Okay.
So I think at the cornerback spot, they got work to do.
What I noticed is there seems to be talent here, but not enough of the top end talent.
Correct.
Like good players, but not great. That yes, Taylor is a dynamic player, but even he has some warts, as you mentioned. So that's pretty much the deal, isn't it? Is that they need, like you said, you mentioned a few of these players. They need some of these guys to take that next step, because you can't win championships unless you have a few sprinkled around great players on the team.
They have DeForest Buckner.
Yep.
That's your guy. Yep. And other than that, on a scale of 1 to 10, the good news is nobody's under a 6. The bad news is nobody's over a 6.
Yeah.
You got 6s across the board.
Yeah.
And so, again, good being the enemy of great, who among these guys do you want to let go? You're a better team with Ryan Kelly on it. But can you upgrade, not at that position, but go get a guy who can really play cornerback? Get a guy who's going to be a significant presence at the quarterback position if Anthony Richardson can't go. You can't rely upon static mediocrity like they did last year. They returned all 22 starters and the 3 starting specialists last year from a 9-8 team.
Yeah.
And they expected something different to happen. Well, guess what? They wound up 8-9.
Yeah.
It didn't happen.
No.
So, Ballard's got to break a few eggs and hope that he comes out, with an omelet.
A couple more things before I let you go. Richardson, speaking of Richardson, do you think he is being coached properly? Do you think that it's more him? It's not the scheme. And I mention that only because of the fact that, you look at him and you go, well, in order for him to succeed, you have to take advantage of his athleticism. You just have to.
Right.
That's that. But then it seemed like it wasn't happening that way. It seemed like in some games he was, in some games he wasn't, and it just didn't seem like there was any like, I don't know. And again, this is from the outside observer. We're not around all the time, but it just seemed like that was the case. Do you see any of that where they're trying to make him into something maybe he's not, and maybe they need to start just go all in on him being this physical type of quarterback and use that athleticism to his advantage?
I think that was a tough part for Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter last year.
Okay.
Was you don't want to expose him too much, so you don't want to run him too much because he's going to get hurt. But at the same time, he's not accurate enough to sustain like a short passing game. And so you're kind of like, all right, well, this he does really well, but then we've got Joe Flacco playing quarterback, and this he doesn't do so well, but we can protect him a little bit better. And every once in a while, he can throw that deep ball, and he throws it accurately. So I think it was kind of like, if you had a poker hand, you got a pair of jacks that you had to play like every single hand, and you were hoping that nobody else had cards. You know what I mean? You never got dealt a flush. Richardson's not that kind of guy. And so I think it put Steichen and Cooter in a position where they had to cover for him in one direction or another. And because they did that, he wound up having the year that he had.
Okay.
I think it's really, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Well, you said it though, and I think that's the idea is if they do that and they follow through and they bring in another quarterback that can be a 1B, then let Richardson be Richardson. And if something happens, well, you've got the next guy. Don't be so afraid of getting him hurt. And you would have thought this was something that they figured out anyway when they drafted him, that you got to use him this way. And that's why it was so strange when a lot of people were surprised a little bit that he got drafted as high as he did. But then you figured, all right, well, they must have a plan, but I don't know if they actually did have a plan. I don't know.
Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
They got punched in the face several times with Anthony Richardson. So,
well, that's the deal. And the last one I want to ask you about it, because you just mentioned it. So is Doolin, is he the team's gunner?
Yeah.
He is. Okay. Got it. Yeah. That's it. That was a quick one.
Really good at it. He is that's his special sauce. And so when they signed him to an extension previously, that was kind of the thing. I mean, he's never going to be a starting wide receiver.
Yeah.
He's making his money on teams.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that because we've been talking at our lads about putting together in the special teams area, maybe the top special teams player on the team. So in other words, like a Doolin wouldn't be where the wide receivers are. He would be on special teams. Right. We would have maybe Gunner there. Is that you can't like find that information. It's not that so easy to find out what everybody team's gunner is. I don't know why. It should be easy, but that's why I asked. So
perfect. And you're exactly right. He's perfect in that role.
Yeah. So anyway, Kent, great job as always. I really appreciate you educating us on what's going on with the Colts. And we got links in the description. You can check it out. Everything Kent Sterling related. And then unless something dramatic happens between now and the draft, we look forward to talking to you after the draft. But if something blockbustery happens, I'd like to use that term a lot nowadays, we'll come calling. But I appreciate it, Kent.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
You got it.